Good afternoon. I am manager and engineer Kim Jae-an, working for Fortinet Korea. Although it's late in the afternoon, I can see many people in the audience. Because I have been vaccinated, so I wish that I could sit next to you and talk about the trends in our company products. But then because of time constraint, I'll try to deliver my presentation talking about two concepts in given minutes. So please listen to my presentation, especially some key trends to do with AI and deep learning and smart automation and platforms. So as for my agenda, this looks quite simple. I'll talk about the brief overview of threat landscape. And also, I'll talk about some of the solutions like FortiAI and FortiSOAR. But then I'll give you some of the use cases using Playbook, so you can refer to the details later on. So I'll talk about the recent threat trends. For the past 20 years, some of the threat trends look like as such. As you're well aware, maybe some of the malware, they started off as like a prank ideas. Actually, you can see the volume has skyrocketed. You can see it's reaching the peak where APT threat or intelligent attacks came into being, where attackers are in favor of financial incentives. And then recently, malware has developed so much to the point where they would access that web. So even civilians actually would easily deposit money in blockchain to get new malware. So malware as a service actually is what we have reached to this point, because even the malware developers are now making the malware an automated platform. So if you're interested, and maybe you would know some samples out there. So as we supply and operate many samples, still malware attacks take place consistently. And thinking about the causes why, it is actually boiling down to codes. But the malicious codes are evolving, and definitely corresponding technologies must be advanced in order to recognize, detect, and address. So in this perspective, so maybe it can be looked upon in terms of control perspective. Maybe you could actually hear similar stories in other sessions. So, I mean, security experts have to study and research the scope and types of attacks. So, for example, ATP and AI-based and malware service, machine-to-machine. There are different types of threats and attacks which are becoming more and more sophisticated. So in order to respond to such tailored and targeted attacks, there are some of the events that you have to look at, whose number is increasing so much in volume, but you still have this issue of labor shortage. In cybersecurity field, I know that you've been working for long, but if you look at the history of cybersecurity, it is a little bit less than 30 years. So compared to other fields, the history seems quite short. But still, we have many types of solutions and technological advancement taking place very fast. But still, we have security expert that's lacking in number. So we cannot infinitely increase the number of experts. Even if we actually try to make the process efficient, we still cannot cater to all the needs. And then you might think that maybe we can resort to AI, automation as fundamental technologies. So for those of you who have attended webinars, you can see that AI-related webinars are being organized a lot in Korea, and some of the commercialized solutions using AI. So in my presentation, I'll talk about where AI has been applied. Maybe you can think of AI in SIM or AI used to analyze traffic, to detect anomalies, to make big data, and compared to baseline, if there's anomaly, things can be detected using AI. But in the concept I'll introduce you, is a bit different. So some of the representative malware, if you think of it, could be ransomware. So it might come through web or email. So once it's infected, you know the story. So it will spread out in the internal network, and the data is encrypted. There will be a threat message asking for cryptocurrencies. So if you think about how we have defended it For example, we had antivirus, IDS, IPS, firewalls. So all of these products, I mean, these are signature-based security solutions where when all these malware are already known. However, for new attacks, there are a lot of damage done in ransomware because there are no new malware. So we have what is called ATP Solution. So at first, we had a signature-based solutions, for example, antivirus, which are like patent-based ones. And then there comes the next generation, Sandbox ones, and we provide similar ones too. So this is to detect the actions. So when there is no signature there, so file is executed in VML and file net registry, and among the actions, if there's anomaly, things can be checked out. If so, there is more score so that they can actually, sending a message saying, please block it because it's more like malignant or malicious. The third one is AI based. So we have a solution for the AI. So I mean, our product actually is based on deep learning and AI. Interestingly enough, so there is a static analysis instead of dynamic one. So deep learning-based malware feature is analyzed based on huge amount of samples collected. So enough learning is taking place, and then new files will coming in. So when these do come in, the pre-learned data set and the neural network engine are used for cross-comparison. So cross-comparison is made so that existing set and the new ones are compared, and if they're similar and identical, what kind of malware features does this new file have? So for example, so it's where the grounds for the learning are set. Even if it's a new version, I mean, hackers do not create malware from the very beginning. So there might be some commonality to be found between this new one and the old ones. So this is static analysis instead of dynamic one in terms of performance. Compared to second generation, this is more superior in performance. But still, in many financial institutions and public agencies, because of compliance issues, so when you are to submit these reports, dynamic analysis reports are needed. But in terms of reporting, Sandbox products are very useful. But there is a slow analytical time required for Sandbox, and the network scale is going up, and Sandbox is not enough really to cover all. It is very costly. In order to overcome limitations, we have the third generation, which is AI-based. So in the organization, there is this cost for employing security experts and solutions. This is analysis from Salary.com. So this is of help to you, I think. So let's say security analysts have 5 or 6 years. So these actually do have capacity to handle incidents, and their annual salary is, for example, like 71 to 110 million won. And also the skill sets required, malware research experience, and breach investigation analysis. So how much can be invested to recruit those? So ROI must be analyzed. So the goal of the malware detection solution is this. So if you listen to many webinars like this, when you do learning, you have to have certain criteria, and you have to think about how to cluster based on such criteria. So all these dots would be each feature of the file. As for Pod AI, so it would have both the features of clean and malicious. Different features of malicious are categorized to form clusters of malicious codes. And there also we have the technological patent here. So there are different types of malware. Even if when the new ones come in, we know the function sets for all these existing ones. Even if there's a new one coming in, we can assume that if it's a phishing or backdoor or not, whatnot. So the installation could be done like this. So ours is not like EDR. especially FortiAI, it is installed on the network layer. So FortiAI, when it comes there, so it is aligned with the firewall and receive the file to do analysis. And if that's the case, then the files and the internet can be extracted for analysis, or the files can be sent remotely to the remote network. Or it can be also the case where malware is disseminated within network. So through switching and mirroring, traffic actually can be transferred to AI, and there could be automatic extraction of files in AI to see if it's malicious or clean. When we do BMT, for example, the files in the network, they're already in the network, so it's not easy to see the visibility if it's clean or malicious. We try to indicate for 2 months, and then we could realize how many of these were malicious and how many clean. So with the POC alone, we could actually provide significant data to our clients. And another thing is that, so although you do operate sandboxes and the network still goes up in scale, and sandbox ones are very expensive equipment, and still maintenance fee is quite high as far as I know. So for the traffic in the network, I mean, you cannot just use Sandbox to analysis for all of it. If you find it too costly, maybe AI can play some complementary role here. And you cannot, for example, expand the usage of Sandbox. And maybe you can use hybrid way for Sandbox and AI. So the Sandbox would receive the files, and the Sandbox would send the files to AI, and within 1 second, actually, you can figure out if it's a false positive or not. And for the suspicious ones, or the files that designate right users, so dynamic analysis can be done in Sandbox. And for web firewalls, if it's connected to these, let's say somebody actually downloaded some malware, ICAP also can be used to block it. So by looking at this case, for AI, it is mostly detection-oriented, but when it's aligned with firewalls, or it can be also aligned with SIM, also it can be aligned with ICAP in the Atp server, so it can also act as the blocking solution in real time. Because, I mean, AI actually is not always right. It can also make, for example, false negatives. So maybe blocking the ransomware whose likelihood of the true ones actually is 90% over, something like that. So logic is like this. Traffic goes into AI. AI extracts the files and disintegrates the files. Disassembler feature can be used from binary files to document files. It breaks down the documents, and then each of them are called code blocks. And there are over 3,000 blocks for a file. So as with the blocks, so that's like a single feature of a file. For example, C language or Java is like a one function or one method, right? So just like that, all the features of a file are to be extracted as a cluster. So the extracted blocks are actually flown into the neural network. So there's comparison with the clean and malicious files to see how different or similar they are, and these are reported to manager in charge. When you think of AI, you might think it's very tricky and very difficult to manage. But for this one, as long as you actually put in the file, you get to know if it's clean or not in a second. And also, if it's needed operationally, and also false positive also can be detected. So after 1 month of stabilization, still it's quite smoothly operated in a month. So compared to Sandbox, analysis speed is very quick when we use AI-based ones. We also do provide sandboxes as well. So to tell you about the highest model for Sandbox, let's say you have to analyze like 2 million files a day. As for Sandbox, even the highest end one, it can analyze, for example, 32,000 per day. In order to do 2 million, you have to have 6 units or more. As for AI, a single one is enough. So performance is super great. So using AI, deep learning can be applied to malware, and you can see the reason why we are using AI-based ones. So this is our Sandbox product, but also for other brands, maybe the results are similar. And the analysis speed, I mean, it's supposed to be very quick to detect malware. So if you're using Sandbox during the dynamic analysis, the malware can spread out quickly. So as for AI, you can get the response in 1 second. So you can actually get the response quick and take actions very quick, and take actions like isolating in the network. So you can take very quick actions. So people, Sandbox, and AI, if you were to compare through three, right? So people, I mean, they might actually have to extra IP and domain and do all these things manually to do blocking. But for Sandbox, if it's already known malware, it can show you the result. But if it does dynamic analysis, it take long. For AI, the performance I told you is very high. So using the very high performance, so the detection results are aligned with the solution, so that additional damage can be prevented. So I told you that this product actually received traffic. Traffic analysis can be done here. So if the worm comes in or malware comes in to infect the PC, and using SMB, if it's spreading out to other PCs, then this also can be traced. So you can see where the worm came from and where it's spread out to. So you can see the whole results in this reporting. So when it's infected with malware, when there's a very big incident, so people had to actually search for the logs, and so if you actually, even if you do commission to KeySaw, it might take quite long. However, as like a solution to take a look at the internal network thoroughly, that would be very great. And recently, public corporations do this kind of analysis. If there's an attack from North Korea, if there's some malware coming into South Korea, maybe they can check out if it has entered their own internal network. So they might do some search like that. They might do IP search at the very beginning. And for us, we don't just do IP search. So even the features of the file can be detected. Let's say autocry is popular, for example. So we can check out if there are any similar files like that. And then we actually try to find commonalities with WannaCry because we know a lot of functional similarities. So we can provide a list of those that are similar in features. And also, this as part of a reinforcement. So existing data sets actually are analyzed by 200 research analysts in Fortinet. But when it's delivered, installed, operated, when there are new files, so through code analysis for the files, there's cross-comparison with the malicious ones. And if the high probability or likelihood of being malicious, I mean, it can also do additional learning for the additional sets. So that's why the true positive rate goes up. So if you are thinking about what to buy, you have to consider, the AI-based ones look at more data, so you can detect more incidents. So you have to think about operability and stability as well. And also, you need to figure out, the features, right, in order to reduce false positives. So there are many cases where AI returns where manual detection is needed. So does it provide enough big data, for example? So as for the machine learning-based ones, the existing data sets of high quality must be well learned, and you can just check out if the vendors has that capacity. And this is the second part. This is about SOAR. I think SOAR was mentioned a lot in this ISEC, so I'll try to briefly talk about the concept. So many people are confused between SIM and SOAR. So vendors producing SIA do also produce SOAR. So why is it that they do handle both? As for SIM, so there is multi-vendor system you operate, and they do have them gathered together in a single spot, and they do have storage for long, and among the stored events, there might be rules people want to look at. So DDoS attack comes in, and if the server is dead, what are the correlations? And the rules can be made out of it. That's SIM. So SIM helps you find events you want to find along with correlations in the detection. And for example, when you write a report and give dashboard, and all these features are added. As for SOAR, it's a bit different. Just like SIM or other solutions, when events would come, I mean, I know that many companies are using SIM, but the actions taken are done by people, right? People to see if it's false, positive, negatives, and then firewalls are installed. If there's an account, you try to figure out who the account user is, and then send emails to these people, right? So all of these actions or detection or analysis, reporting and response, all of these are automated in SOAR. So, I mean, SIEM collects data and SOAR collects data for such reasons. SIEM collecting data, yes, and then making rules for different circumstances and finding the rules there. But then people take actions, but then that people part is automated in SOAR. In order to do that, SOAR has a lot of competencies. In order to automation, there must be some input to do it. That's why it collects data. But SIM is a bit different. It just opens the ports and it would just wait for the data to come in. But SOAR is a bit different. It is very active in getting the data. What I mean here is that, for example, let's say there is a VPN access log. And for SIM, there's an account name. And without any alignment, that's it. There's nothing it can do. But SOAR, with that account name, it would look around the HR system and find the data. But it would have to look into Active Directory, or it would also look into the HR system to actually extract all the user information and have it attached to the event. So this is what we call data reinforcement. So very proactive in giving commands even or changing policies. And also it does reporting job. So if I think about SOAR, they do mention automation by many vendors if I visit many conferences. But it doesn't just collect data, it would extract IPs and then do an inquiry of intelligence. If it is malicious, it would have attached and provide to users, and then block it as well. So there's a workflow like that for automation platform. But the automation takes place at the bottom layer. But what is critical is SOC workbench, because just like the 1.40 AI one, I mean, this is not where the effects would come into place. As for SOAR, I mean, there must be optimization process to be better suited to the workplace. So it's SOC solution. So when you decide to adopt SOA, so there must be at least in one sentence on how the work was done. So maybe you can talk about like top 3 workloads being highly dense, and along with KPIs. In most of the cases, I mean, automation is taking place like that. If there's just a single manager, it would be convenient, but there are many, and they would do the tracking for an incident, and there will be also history tracking, and who did the work, and who is the manager in charge. And this is something that was to be done in 2 years, and maybe it could be delays of 3 hours. So all the current status tracking and management also is done in this platform workflow. So when you're to adopt PNC or SOA, automation is something of a must. And because many are working together in the field, if the network is big, it also needs to consider scalability. And just like I told you before, once you adopt it, that's not the end. So when you also install and operate and so forth, so you have to generate a playbook, and automation and technical support also is critical. So try to check out if your partner can provide all of these services. So when you do alignment, we do call it connector here. So there's a module called connector, which is built in. And this is just provided, built free of charge. So if you see the right-hand side, I mean, you can see the foreign brands as vendors, but also Korean solutions can be aligned. When I say Korean, I mean, it doesn't mean that Korean ones can interoperate better. So even for genius ones, they're interoperable. So there's no issue there. If the counterparty solutions, so they could actually give API, SSH, or web. So one of these are open. So I would approach and then enable interaction. So I keep mentioning SOAR Playbook. It looks like that. So when there was automation in the existing solution, it was very primary automation. So it might look complicated by writing a script, but mostly when there's a rule coming up, block it or release it or write a report. It was very primary, but SOAR is different. It's one level up. So when the event comes in, you start it and you extract indicators. And then this is a flow to analyze a domain. The alien bold, IP stand. So all of the intelligence actually would be inquired. But then internally, if there's a solution, security solution, it can actually be attached together in parallel. All the outcome is collect together if it's malicious, if it's clean, or if you don't know. There are such options provided. And this is the most distinctive feature than the previous concept of automation. Then there's also an approval process that can be entered here. So because automatic blocking is too risky, it is actually subjected to the manager in charge approval. So that process can be intervening inside. But the final actions to be taken is taking blocking action anyway. So this is one use case. So let's say this client also only used SIM. But some of the challenges were, for example, they were controlling with SIM, but malware was spreading out internally and traffic was high. It could only detect when such things happen, and there had to be human reporting. But that was slow. So there was still the spread of malware in the network. So what they wanted to is to be able to respond preemptively. So to have a full visibility with SIM, but to accelerate the speed of detection for a large scale. So I have different types of use cases, but due to time constraint, I'll be quick. And if you have further questions, you can contact me later. So, as we analyze the network indicator analysis, it would take about 1 minute to dozens of minutes. But with SOA, it takes much quicker because it's computer-based. I'm sorry the letters are small, but depending on the types of attack, you can make a playbook. But for scanning, how can you respond? For example, CNC server, when it's detected, how to respond. For example, ransomware infection spread, how to respond. So depending on the cases of attack, you can come up with countermeasures and how to make report, how to reinforce what data, and even ending up blocking it. So you can make a whole flow here. So what is significant is this slide. So it's not that detailed. So when there are security incidents, they show you the overall workflow. The green ones automated through SOA. The purple ones, nevertheless, still there's a human intervention needed. So, for example, you have to look at the raw data. So actually something that somebody who knows the things well should read, for example. So when there are logs and it's stored in SIM, and through rules, events are detected. And then SOAR, if it's locked, it will just do tracking. But then if the threat level is high, if it's not blocked, it can be deployed in Playbook. So you can just extract, for example, domains or IPs or files. And then for each of them, you would actually run the playbook for analysis. So we check out the external reputation, use IPD, for example, and Googling as well. So all of these, this will do. And also it tries to track if there were any similar malware to the query in SIM, and also do the query in EDR to see if there are any recent attacks. So all of these are added together. If the human analysis needed, so it is sent to the people, but then if not, based on the thresholds, and it will just do the action by itself and do the reporting. So you can see how many man hours can be saved. So for SOA, basically speaking, when you consider it, whether installing it, operating it, there are several key points to consider. So you probably have a lot of security operation tasks. So how much load do you have there, and how automated you want them to be, because there still should be human interventions. So you are automating them using SOA. How much time can you save? So you need to have that direction. In fact, through many demonstration DMP, you need to see if these can be deployed well in your organization. And third-party alignment, or you need to check out if there's any issues there in operation, and if it's easy enough to do playbook writing. So in other countries, there are a lot of references and use cases, but in Korea, it has been just this year where these started to be applied very in full swing. As told you before, this is not a solution where you just adopt and everything's just finished. There must be operability and manageability and scalability you need to consider, because traffic will go up. And because of the nature of the solution, it's not that easy to do migration. And after you adopt it, so the scalability of the event and change the playbook, you also need to see if the vendors have the full capabilities and technological capacity.